Welcome to CX Matters, a podcast where we dive into all matters CX to find out what really makes the difference, what moves the needle, and what makes customers tick. CX Matters is a podcast powered by Hello Customer, the platform that helps organizations turn feedback into real business improvements. My name is Bram De Vos and I'm your host today. And today I am joined by Michel Stevens and Horst Remes. Michel approaches CX through leadership and culture, Horst through design and evidence. Together, we'll look at how to turn customer experience from stories and sentiment into numbers and proof. From experience to evidence, from metrics to cash. We'll be talking return on investment for CX. Welcome, Michel. Welcome, Horst.
Hi, Bram.
Hi, Bram.
Nice to see you guys again. Now, let's dive right in. I'm going to throw the spanner in the works, so to speak, because ROI is a topic that is discussed very, very often among thought leaders in CX. The discussions or the debates have been going on for years, and you both have the same argument. You both argue that CX isn't just some kind of fluffy feel-good initiative, but a business lever. And so why is it so, do you think, that linking CX to financial outcomes is still so hard?
Well, I think that we've been told for many years that CX is about emotions. It's about understanding the customer emotions and then playing to that. And just as a result of that, we've been trained that way. It has always been about emotion. And nobody actually thought about, okay, so those are the rainbows and the fairy tales. Let's go beyond that. So there was never a driver to really understand that really well. And I think it's only in the recent years that people will go like, okay, so we're not paid in smileys, we're paid in euros. So how does that work actually?
I'm often fascinated why it's so hard. Well, it shouldn't be hard. I mean, CX is an investment like you would have an IT investment. So why is it not hard if you invest in IT, and why is it hard if you invest in customer experience?
Yeah, true. I've heard the argument very recently is that for a lot of investments that companies make, nobody cares about the ROI. You just assume it's there. And that's very, very often the case as well. So, some things are not questioned.
Yeah.
And some argue that customer experience people are being forced into talking about ROI, and it's not their normal terrain. What do you think about that?
Well, I will let you go on this one.
They should. They should. I mean, why are we doing this? That's the fundamental question. Why are we doing customer experience? Well, there's only a few levers that we have to run a business well, right? And it's very simple, actually. It's either we have more revenue or either we reduce costs, right? That's how we maximize our profits. And so customer experience can increase revenue. And that's what everybody knows. And so, if we have a very good service or very good products and with related service, yes, we can sell more to the same customers. They'll buy more from us. Yes, they'll be loyal longer and they won't go away that quickly. That's also interesting. Or they'll talk about us in a favorable way, and so they'll bring other customers. So that's the income side. Obviously, there's also a cost reduction side, which is often forgotten.
It is.
And it's just sometimes a lot easier and a lot cheaper to work with satisfied customer than with frustrated customers, especially when something goes wrong. And that's what's often forgotten. The cost to serve of a satisfied customer is lower.
Yeah. Isn't that because in the past we didn't make the connection between a customer experience strategy and a business strategy, that they were separate things? Like, I mean, if you look at it from a strategic point of view, people ask me, so how do you formulate a customer experience strategy? First question is, do you need a separate one? Because it's very much intertwined with your business strategy. If you have an offensive strategy, like you're going to focus on sales, on acquisition, obviously that is going to reflect in your customer experience strategy. And vice versa as well. If you have a defensive strategy, then you're going to do other levers. You're going to work on churn. You're going to work on things that will cost less money and stuff like that. So is it because of that we never made that connection before on a strategic level?
Right. Yeah. I just think that everybody who's working in customer experience should always make the reflection what am I contributing to now? And rather, if it's offensive or defensive, what is the strategy of my company, and what am I now supposed to do in order to help that strategy move forward?
Yeah.
So,
We're in full agreement there.
I'm not surprised.
And one thing that is also often forgotten, apart from the cost to serve, is that a customer experience, a process that satisfies customers, often is also more efficient. And that is what often is forgotten. A well-designed process does both. It satisfies customers and it's also more efficient. And for instance, if you give people peace of mind, they won't be calling you all the time, right? And you don't want to know how many questions we answer 2, 3, 5 times because the question came in, we haven't answered in time. Then a question came in by email, for instance. That same person is calling us in the afternoon, is sending an SMS or a WhatsApp the next day. And so actually 3 people are working on a question that could have been answered by one person.
And that could have been answered, or that should never have been asked in the first place. It could have been avoided altogether. And when I was driving here to the studio today, we were talking about all those bad customer experience where you're forced to send a message, call, to find something, to get some more information. And if only the company would know that there is a gap in the information they give, if they would fix that, nobody would have to call them. So the experience would be better. And there would be less costs because nobody would have to be on the call center.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to fight the internals of an organization. Like, for instance, 15 years ago, I was at the head of a large customer service operation with a reverse logistics part. So that meant that people could call in and say, well, my device is broken, so you need to fix it, right? So this is 15 years ago. This is way before Bol.com or any other said, hey, just keep your device, right? So it's a long time ago. And at some point, we were looking at the numbers, and I said, well, we're paying a lot of things for that reverse logistics part, because what a customer did was actually he sent it to us, then we had to examine it. Is it really broken? And then only then we would send a refurbished product. And so I said to the guys, I said, why do we do that? What is our goal? Our goal is that customer continues to use our product. it is not the device itself, it's the consumables that are in it. So why don't we send them straight away a new device? And I was a heretic. People looked at me and were like, what are you going to do? Maybe they'll send us bricks. And I was like, yeah, maybe some people will do, but 98% of the people will not. And they will actually use our product within 2 days. I mean, it's that simple. We save €300,000 a year just by doing it differently there.
But isn't it the case also that in businesses there is sometimes, what is called in the literature the homo economicus is very strong, and therefore there is little trust in the consumer, in the client, in the customer. There's little trust, and so the worst is assumed. Therefore, the processes are built and engineered to deal with the worst of the cases, whereas the worst of the case maybe...
But that's so interesting. That is so interesting, what you're saying, because that's very expensive.
Of course,
a lack of trust is hugely expensive.
Hugely.
Yeah, I was working with an energy company, and so if for instance a tenant leaves a house and another tenant comes in, and that could be a small business, could be a house, they can't take the meter, right? The meter stays there. It's fixed. So they have to carry over what the meter says at that moment in time, because each has to pay their own part.
Yes.
And so one of the things was that you need 2 signatures to send the meter readings to that company, because then you're sure that they agree on the meter readings.
Yes.
But customers found that so cumbersome, and you had to check all those signatures. Right. So we thought, well, people just said, well, it's sometimes undoable to get together at the same time. So we said, well, how often does it happen that the meter readings from somebody going out and somebody else coming in at a later stage are different?
How many times does that actually happen?
And they argued over 50%, and that was true.
Okay.
So we are, oh, damn. Okay, that's a bummer. But when we started investigating, the difference was a few cents.
Yes.
What happened was the meter continued to read something because like a fridge was still on,
Right.
wasn't switched off, like a minor consumption. And so the really big differences were only a few percent.
There you are. Yeah.
And so we turned that whole thing around where we said, okay, we will not require 2 signatures anymore. But then obviously the consequences, sometimes you'll have a discussion.
That will happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you both know that I'm a great book lover, right? And one of the books that I think about right now is a book by the Dutch guy Rutger Bregman. In English, it's called Humankind, and it's actually it's overhauling all the assumptions that we as modern people make of how distrustful we should be of other people. And he says, no, most people are very kind and very honest people. And yes, there will therefore be sometimes somebody who is not. But most people are. And yet in movies and literature, we are trained to believe, do not trust the other one. And our civilization is only a very thin layer of veneer. And underneath there is the beast, right? L'enfer, c'est les autres, and all those things. And he argues, he says, well, the opposite is actually true. And what you say, the example you give is speaks volumes in that respect. And I think that's very true. But of course, yeah, it's very difficult sometimes to argue, especially with people who are a little bit distrustful by nature, or should be. And very often people in positions of CFOs, they are wary of being tricked and fooled, and they are sometimes very inclined not to believe in human nature too much. Mm-hmm. Don't you think?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, well, I also think that the CFOs are humans just like you and me, and they.
Do you really think that?
Yeah,
that is astonishing.
I really do. I've met quite a few who actually are living and breathing as well. So for me, it is always a matter of finding the right language to speak to each other. I've seen, and this is honest to God, I've seen CX programs run with a back of the napkin kind of calculation. And that has a lot to do with how it is positioned against the business strategy, the internal culture, how that is positioned as well. And I've also seen CX programs that run with very deep calculations on how are we going to measure customer lifetime value and how are we going to make sure that the ROI is secured. Mm-hmm. There is something to say for both of them. And I always fall back on my position. Speak the language of the people that you have in front of you. If it is C-level who are very rational, then try to make your point and make it come across. Sometimes I also compare it with, and I think you referenced it as well earlier on, is that do we argue over the ROI of a factory floor? We need to build a factory. Do we argue over the ROI? We don't. We just build the factory. And yeah, the ROI will come. I'm pretty sure. Nobody ever calculates that, or maybe somebody will. But sometimes you also need to take things on a principle point of view. I'm not making a case against a business case for the sake of clarity. But yeah, it depends on who is in front of you.
I would agree with that. And I also think that, in terms of speaking with CFOs, very, very much I do relate with you have to speak the language of the person in front of you. And in fact, CFOs are human too. That is, they are accountable for a number of things. So it is only logical that they are looking to be sure, right? Peace of mind is very important for them as well. But then the thing is that we do still, I believe, need to teach, and this is an appeal to the both of you, and I'll also include myself because guilty as charged. We also have to teach the people within the CX community more about how to do it. Because what we do, and today as an example, we were talking meta about this today in this podcast, and it's very comfortable to do that. But I think that what we should add at some point is an actual lesson of how could you give a couple of examples of how do you calculate it, be it on the back of a napkin or be it very extensively. But you, Michel, you run an academy, you run the CX Academy. So how do you approach that in your courses?
Well, as I said, you can make it as easy as you want and as complex as you want it as well. And the reality is that return on investment on customer experience is very messy. it is not always very straightforward. People in marketing have been fighting that for decades now, and they still haven't figured out how to prove the ROI of marketing, because there are a lot of influencers that you can take into effect. Like, for instance, an investment today will not immediately yield results tomorrow, or even not next week, next month, next quarter, right?
Which is not different with advertising, for instance, right?
Exactly.
There you go.
Same problem.
So again, you make it as complex and as easy as you want, actually. But the question I always ask is, what are you trying to prove? What are you trying to achieve with the business case? Is it to get more budget? Is it to justify your investments? What are you trying to do? What is the rationale within that organization? That's where I always start. And then again, you can have many ways of calculating, and there are even as many ways to disprove whatever you said. Like, for instance, I like customer lifetime value, for instance, as a metric to peg against. But you could also say, but CLV is something that looks in the past and makes a prediction for the future. So CLV is a forecast. Okay, that's true. So there are always upsides and downsides, and that's why I say it is messy. It is not as black and white as people would like.
But then again, every business case is a forecast.
Yeah,
it most certainly is. Yeah.
If we do an investment in IT, we also rely on a forecast. What is that IT going to save us, and what is it going to bring us? It's the same thing. It's only for some magical reason it sometimes seems more difficult with customer experience. I still fail to understand why that is.
Yeah.
And tell me then, Horst, because I understand what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, I relate to it because I recognize that. But why is it then that it's still such a struggle? Because you make the point, it shouldn't be. It's evident. And yet this is such a contentious topic. This is really a subject of discussion. How do you explain that then?
Well, I think like it's sometimes the uphill battle. If I talk about an IT system, let's say I'm convinced we want a certain IT tool. We want this tool. And now my mission is to prove to everybody that this is the tool we need. That is going to be an uphill battle. That's going to be difficult. If we take it the other way around, if we see what is the business need of our business, what do we want to aim for, what is our strategy, where do we want to go? And then we say, okay, if we want to go there and everybody agrees, what do we need as tools? And okay, we need a tool that does such and such and such. So what is the best tool going to be? If you take it that direction, it's going to be much easier, but that's often not what we do. Often we see
we choose the uphill battle.
Yeah, we want to install a customer experience idea, and then we want to prove that it's going to help us, which is a strange approach to me.
If because you lead Onestone, it's a consultancy company in customer experience. What you told me about that is what you are looking for first and foremost, you and your people, is the buy-in from C-level. If you have those conversations, what do they look like? Is that always a conversation about ROI, or is that how do I envisage that?
Well, it's not always about ROI, but it's always about business goals. It's never about a gimmick in customer experience. It's like, okay, where do we want to go? What do we want to be? And so the question I try to answer as soon as possible is, we've got two people that are talking about us. What are they saying? What do we want them to say? Right? And so that will actually determine how we need to create an experience, how we need to develop our processes, how we need to adapt our offering. It could also be...
Because you told me that you really, from the get-go for a project, you really challenge C-level on that as well. You really want to understand, is their interest in what we're going to do genuine? Because you know that some of the things that you're going to bring up aren't going to be easy. You're going to challenge certain things in processes at some time, and you're going to do experiments the way that you do.
Exactly.
And you know that sometimes these things will be uncomfortable. So from the get-go, you challenge those C-levels a lot. Can you say something about that?
So the question is there a clear strategy? Do we know where we want to go? That's the first question. And then the second question, as soon as that's clear, the second question is, can we explain that in a way that makes it clear to everybody in the organization what their role is is in that strategy. And that's the second layer. And often you have a more high level strategy that everybody in upper management understands, but everybody in the organization needs to understand what it means for them. So that translation to, okay, what does that mean for everybody else is important. And as soon as that becomes clear, all the rest becomes a lot clearer. And then obviously we want to experiment with things because we never know how something is going to turn out exactly, but we can always measure, is it contributing to what we wanted or not?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think it has to do with how well do we understand our customers. Like everybody knows their customers. Yeah, you don't have to do research on it. Don't do it because we know our customers, right?
Exactly.
And I very often push back on that one, obviously, because, I got a question. And this is, again, a decade ago, before we had apps everywhere. And somebody said, we want to build an app so that when there is a car accident, somebody can take pictures and upload it directly to us so that we can start the insurance claim. And my first question was, why does that customer have the app on their phone? And I said, no, you don't have to ask that. That is something you assume that they have. I said, I'm not going to assume that because this will drive the solution, because if you assume that they have an app, then you will think in terms of an app. If you assume that they are just a customer with you, they don't have an app, then a web application will be much more smart because that is something they will have when they have an accident. Obviously, they didn't go for me. But I always start with, okay, so what is a functional need? What is the emotional need, and what is the social need of that customer?
Those three, where do you get those from? Is that something that you sketch those out at the beginning, those three kinds of needs? Where does that stem from?
Yeah. I listened excitingly to the previous podcast with Horst, and I was like, ooh, Daniel Kahneman was mentioned. And I said, Daniel did a lot of very interesting research on how do people make decisions? How does that work? And what levers do we need to pull to make a decision? That's one. And secondly, what I really like to work with is jobs to be done. So what is the job to be done of that customer, right? And we are very, very good at doing the functional things in organizations. We know how to process an insurance claim, for instance, right? But then to your point of certainty, we do not understand why we need to be swift with our answers when a customer asks, so when do we need to pay, or when do we get our money? A great example was with a leasing company. And they had a very bad experience at the end always, because when you turn in your car, obviously there could be some check. Exactly, the dreaded check. And one of the costs that is always there is that the rims of the car, right? They are damaged very often, and it can lead up to some...
Speak for yourself.
Well, I cannot park a car, sorry, Horst. But the thing is that you get that notice really on the spot, right? And what people forget is that comes as a financial surprise to many people. So the question is not how are we going to mitigate that at that moment, how we're going to mitigate it 6 months ahead and give that customer a heads up. That's not a functional question. That's an emotional question, a social question.
Fascinating thing, that whole social level, because we talked about that a couple of months ago, and I suddenly came to the realization that I'd never explicitly talked about that in my life, whereas the effects of it I feel every day. That whole social thing, and with what we do at Hello Customer, we measure customer satisfaction, and what so many clients tend to forget is to be outspoken about what they do with the measurements. And of course, they have to look at what the return on investment is, for sure. But one of the returns on investment is communicate about the fact that you're asking people's opinions and doing something with it, because that's going to be the social lever in place. So that's really something that struck me at that time. If I were to ask each one of you, and you could give us, you give one big topic that you believe would help the listeners to bring the point of return on investment across. What one message would you each give to a CEO who is skeptical about the financial value of CX? And I'm going to ask both of you separately, so it has to be a different answer. So the person who comes first is the lucky one. And the lucky winner today is Mr. H. Remes from Ghent.
All right. I would say you can lead the horse to the water, but you cannot.
You can
make
lead the
it
horse
drink.
to the water, or
Also,
the horse? Yeah.
Also, yeah, to the wine. I'd say, but
Excellent.
Yeah, you can lead the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink, right? So, customer experience is just one strategy. It's not the only sacred strategy. You can be better at other things if you want to be, and either you're the cheapest or you have the very, very best products, and all the rest of us has to be customer-centric. And so, if you see that, obviously you can do great things. If you fail to see it, that is also fine. I mean, there's probably other levers that you can use.
Yeah. Okay. Before I give you the floor, Michel, you can have the best product, you can have the cheapest product, but everybody, the rest of us will have to deliver a good customer experience.
Well, there's basically those three strategies that you can have.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what you see in reality happening right now, right? I often use Ryanair as an example, and I peg Wizz Air against that. And Wizz Air and Ryanair, they do basically the same thing. They're cheapest, right? That's the battle they fight. But in reality, what you see in their approach towards customers, Wizz Air is that tad little bit more customer friendly. I'm not saying that they're customer centric. They are, and they have pretty good customer experiences, both of them. I will make that argument later on in another podcast, maybe. But that is the battle that you need to fight. If you are not the cheapest, there is something else that you need to go for. That is for sure.
And funny thing is, you can only be the cheapest in one way.
Yeah.
There's only one way to be the cheapest, but there's more than one way to have the best product, and there's also more than one way to have the most or the best customer experience.
Yes. So that brings me to the question to you, Michel. If there would be one argument you would present to a CEO that's skeptical, what would be your one definitive argument?
Problem is that I would agree with Horst, but
that's a tragedy.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, that's not how we can make podcasts.
No.
You don't understand the principle here.
Now it's on your shoulders to make it interesting now.
Exactly. Putting you on the spot. Sorry about that.
That's all right. No. I was thinking about it because Horst was giving an explanation. I was like, yeah, I totally agree with that. There's one thing I would like to add, and it's that's linking it to the business strategy. That's the link I always try to make. Is that because that will define the direction of your customer experience. And again, I fall back on my binary solution. If you are looking for acquisition in your business strategy, you need to be looking for acquisition in your customer experience strategy. They need to shake hands. And once you can show like whatever we are going to do is going to help you achieve your goals. That is the only mission of our customer experience team. You will get them on board. You will get them on board for sure.
Amen.
Amen to that. Well, thank you both very much. That's all we have time for today, but thank you very much. And this also wraps up this special 3-part series of CX Matters. CX Matters is a podcast produced by Hello Customer. If you want to discover how your company can act smarter on customer feedback, visit hellocustomer.com. Now, if you haven't yet, you can check out episode 1 with Michel Stevens from CXM and from Customer Friendly. And that's about customer-centric culture as a compass. And that's the first episode of our podcast CX Matters. And episode 2 with Horst Remes. And we talk about the myths of customer experience. We bust them as we go along. Together, they complete the full picture, the full trilogy of our podcasts. Thank you all for listening. Goodbye.